Ready.
Alright, hi, my name is Garrett Evans, and today I'm going to be illustrating for you the rise and popularity of electronic dance. EDM. Yeah, I see that. Alright, just to start it out, I'm going to start off with a question. How many genres of music, of EDM, do you think there are? Just anybody.
7.
7?
Yeah.
Not even close. Any other guesses?
191.
You cheated. As you can see here, these are all different types of EDM. There's a lot. So to start out, we really have to delve into what is EDM? What is electronic dance music? Well, electronic dance music is electronic music produced primarily for the purpose of using within a nightclub setting. It's produced with the intention of being used in the context of a DJ set, and DJ sets can last anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours long. And it's all continuous, and it makes it all flow. So it's kind of hard to keep it at a steady pace that keeps people interested. So how did EDM get started? Composers began redefining the concept of instruments and organized sound and as early as the 20th century, which in turn redefined music with modernism, futurism, and postmodernism. The first debatable EDM producer was Delia Derbyshire. Do any of you guys know the show Doctor Who, the original one? She actually made the theme song for that. And it was a mixture of a lot of electronic sounds, and it was unlike something that anybody's heard before. And her first album was also called An Electronic Storm, and this was in 1963. And then the next step for EDM, believe it or not, was actually disco. Disco was the first step for EDM. It consisted of a plethora of modified instruments like trumpets, saxophones, and acoustic guitar and drums, and they layered a lot of really funky, groovy synths over it, and it really caught people's attentions, and that's why it became so big in the era that it did, because it was kind of like an era where a lot of up-and-coming drugs started to surface, and because that was like the hippie era. And then the 1980s to the 1990s was synth pop and techno, and a lot of you guys know what techno is. It's very monochrome, it's very consistent, and there's not really a lot of variety to it. And synth pop, have you ever heard the song Sweet Dreams Are Made of These? That's synth pop. You got the perfect idea of what it is. And that's when they really started to make really fast drum patterns with a lot of really adverse synths that you've never really, you probably wouldn't like them because they were really early and they were still in development. It was like an R&D project. All right, and now we're going to talk about moving into the modern era of EDM, which is kind of today, like early 2000s to today. House got its limelight in 2004, and it pulled beat patterns from techno, slowed it down, and added the concept of drops. It's more like a roller coaster. So it starts out with the build-up, the breakdown, the drop, the cool down, the build-up, the drop, the end of the song. So it was more of a roller coaster instead of a steady techno pace like it was before. And then also, a thing called trap came from the UK and the UK underground along with dubstep. A lot of you guys have heard of dubstep. I see you in the back still. You're like my biggest fan. And dubstep and trap came from the UK underground, and then it migrated to the southern states of the United States, and then it kind of blew up from there. And a lot of people liked how different it was and how hard and heavy hitting it was. It really fit the generation of live now, think about it later. All right, and in closing, some of you may still not like EDM, but it will continue to gain popularity in younger generations due to the lifestyle it promotes and the events, concerts it's played at. So you can see here, that House had its biggest year in 2004. That's when it really took off. And then now, that's trap at the top right there, and then that's dubstep coming in at a close second. That's what the 1980s clubs used to look like, very small, very not a lot of people liked it still, and that's what it is today. That's EDC. And I actually have a sound clip that I'd like to play for you guys. Is there any way I can adjust the sound so it's not really loud?
There's a knob on the dashboard in front of you underneath the post-it there.
Are you posted here? I could hear the feedback, but I can't hear the music.
You might want to check the sound on the computer down in the tray. Looks like it's off.
It's muted, yeah.
So this is like disco. This is where it started out, and then the next song is gonna be where it is today. Bear with me, you might not like it. This is where it is now. No, that's Excision. Excision, yeah. Alright, that's my presentation.
You went to Saturday.
Ray, what did you think?
So you stated your thesis pretty well. You got clear the point that you were going to explain the growing popularity of EDM. You sort of had sources cited. I'm sure you had them, but didn't really cite them in your speech. So next time, just make sure you're doing that. I liked that you had the two different graphs of the different types of EDM. That's about it. Other than that, I thought it was pretty good.
All right. You start with your purpose statement instead of with the attention device. I think you ought to ask that rhetorical question that actually, it's not a rhetorical question, it's an audience survey. You're asking people to actually respond, and then use your visual with all the list of the different types of subgenres that you're talking about there to make your point, and then introduce the topic. I think that would probably be a more effective way to get started. It seems like you've got it a little bit backwards. The purpose statement was clearly stated. I like that. And you give a little bit of a justification because of the popularity of the music. There's not really a very clear preview. It sounds like it's mostly going to be a chronological inventory of different periods of electronic music. And I mean, you're starting at its originations back in the 1960s, early 1960s. And you're bringing it up to today, so that's pretty much the organizational pattern that you're using. But I couldn't pick out clear, distinct categories that you were talking about. In the body of the speech, you start talking about some of the different genres, and that becomes kind of a sub-organizational pattern. So I think you need to be a little bit clearer about how you're going to develop that information. I like the fact that you defined what electronic music, dance music is. I thought that was a pretty good start, although I didn't really hear a source citation on that. But in the rest of the presentation, I heard a whole bunch of references to different kinds of genres that never got defined. I don't know the difference between trap, drops, dubstep, which apparently is very popular in this part of the room, but I don't know what that is. I wouldn't recognize it or be able to, if it hit me in the forehead, I wouldn't know. And I feel a little bit, and I'm not sure I would distinguish that. I could definitely distinguish the two types of music that you're playing there. I mean, that's, the first is the disco type style, and but out of the whatever 191 variations that you have, I don't know that I could distinguish that last one from any others, and I'm not sure if there's, what makes them different from one another. Is it the pace that it's playing at, the instrumentation, the presence or absence of vocals, the speed at which things are delivered? I don't know, or the interjection of sounds and that sort of thing. I'm sure that there's some explanation on those sorts of things, and that might have been maybe a more useful way to develop some of the content in there. I did, maybe make the historical review a short section in the first part, where you were reviewing the history. That's section 1. Section 2 would be talking about picking out, distinguishing 3 or 4 key styles of this electronic music, maybe the most popular ones. You had a whole list there of what the popular ones are. So, since we've got a list of those things, maybe talk about the top 3 and what's different about them, and then at the end talk about how the music is listened to, enjoyed at festivals as opposed to mostly in clubs. I get the feeling that there aren't EDC clubs anymore, or there are EDM clubs. Okay, so I mean, you make it sound like, well, that's the way it was in the 80s and nobody does that anymore. It's now all at these big festivals. I'm going, okay, is that really true? I don't know. And that's one of those things that needs to be clarified. There weren't a lot of sources being cited in the presentation, and that's a drawback. I think you've got a subject that the audience will be interested in, but the organization is less clear than it ought to be. The early slide I thought was pretty effective at kind of indicating all the possible choices there. I think it would have been more effective if you used it as the attention device and got into it instead of starting with the purpose statement like we talked about before. You do rush through it, so it's a little bit hard to pick up any of those sorts of things. And I thought you did the same sort of thing with some of the graphics on the statistical information, the selling, the music, or the best-selling kind of music. Do they sell it, actually? Is it something that is sold, or is it consumed in some other way? I don't know exactly how they measure those sorts of things, but I like the idea of these slides that you have. I thought that they work pretty well, and they give you some nice visual contrast, but again, that they rush by a little bit. The sound comparison at the end I thought was pretty effective, but it is 2 very distinct genres. That's the thing that's probably not hard for us to pick out. It's the other stuff that I think might be a little bit more complex. I could definitely say, well, what you were playing, the second part of it, is probably something that's popular now, and the first part, which by the way was not the original version, minus points for not using the Bee Gees version, and minus 2 points. So that's an issue. Okay, thank you.